Her daughter was throwing a celebration in her house, calling it freedom. Candace laughed over wine, saying, "She'll be gone by next month." Every guest nodded, sitting in chairs Evelyn bought. Then the front door opened. Evelyn, their mother, their mistake, walked in, cane tapping like a verdict. She raised a glass. "To Evelyn Hargrove, the woman none of you buried." Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The mashed potatoes were still warm when her son muttered it, loud enough for her to hear. She just shows up for free food. Judith Carter, 71, paused mid-reach for the serving spoon. Her hand didn't shake, though she half expected it to. The gravy boat sat between her and Daniel like a fragile treaty neither of them believed in anymore. She passed it to him slowly, eyes never meeting his. Her face remained neutral, practiced, a nurse's calm. But inside, something tilted. Across the table, Marcy, lip-glossed and half-drunk on Pinot, snorted with performative sympathy. "Daniel," she said in that faux chiding tone, "don't be mean." Then, under her breath, but not nearly low enough, "You know she can't help it." Jude took a long sip of wine, bitter, dry, like the air between them. The dining room, once hers, smelled faintly of cinnamon candles and reheated ham. The furniture she'd picked decades ago had been painted a sterile white, her old curtains replaced by gauzy farmhouse chic knockoffs from some HGTV viral boutique. Chloe, her granddaughter, sat 2 seats down in a scratchy plaid dress, carefully piling peas into a smiley face. She caught Jude's eye and beamed. No one else noticed the shift in Jude's expression, but something small and permanent had just broken loose. She stood, pushing her chair back slowly. "I'm going to lie down for a bit," she said, folding her napkin neatly. "Little too much stuffing." No one protested. Daniel was already reaching for the remote to resume the football game, his attention shifting like he'd flicked off a light switch. Jude stepped into the hallway, her heels quiet against the faux wood laminate. The walls still held photos from another era, her era. Chloe as a baby, Daniel in cap and gown, a younger Jude with a nurse's badge clipped to her scrubs, a life distilled into 4x6 rectangles no one stopped to look at anymore. Her purse was on the bench near the front door. She didn't hesitate. Slipping out her phone, she opened Zillow like it was muscle memory. Her fingers moved with precision. Listings, filter, price cap, Asheville area. She'd done this dance before, late at night in moments of restless silence, but this time felt different. This time she didn't just browse. She saved 3 properties, all tidy, all quiet. One had a garden view, another had a balcony that faced the morning sun. Her thumb hovered a second longer, then tapped Contact Agent. The response box blinked back at her. She typed without looking up. "Can you talk tomorrow?" Sent. Upstairs, the hum of the game filtered down through the vents. Laughter, Marcy's voice rising, something about that backsplash still not being up to code. Jude turned away, heart steady, mind sharper than it had felt in weeks. No anger, just clarity. The kind you only get when someone forgets you have ears, history, and a name. In the kitchen, a ceramic plate clinked into the sink, her antique china, the set her mother left her. She'd noticed the chip weeks ago, hadn't said anything. Footsteps approached. Jude turned just in time to see Chloe peek around the corner, carrying a crayon drawing folded into quarters. "Grandma," she whispered, "I made you something." Jude crouched, smoothing her skirt. Chloe handed her the drawing, stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked tree. "That's you and me. And this is your house." She traced the tiny house with her finger. "It's beautiful." "Mom says your house is old," Chloe said quietly. "But I think it's magic." Jude smiled, a flicker of warmth breaking through. "You're my favorite little truth-teller." Behind them, Daniel called out, "Chloe, don't bother Grandma, she's resting." Jude stood. "She's not bothering me. She's reminding me." Chloe's brow furrowed. "Of what?" Jude looked toward the front door, the mountains barely visible through the frosted glass. "That some things should never be passed down just because people expect them." Chloe didn't understand, but she nodded like she did. As she tucked the crayon drawing into her purse beside her phone, A low wind stirred outside, rustling the brittle leaves along the porch. Jude stepped back into the living room for a moment, just to observe. The way Marcy talked over Daniel, the way he laughed without joy, the way no one looked at her twice. They thought she was just tired, just old. They would learn. They boxed her leftovers with foil, unlabeled, loosely packed, and handed to her like a pity prize. Once Jude had cooked for the entire neighborhood, ladling warmth and gravy into the air until the walls smelled of butter and rosemary for days. Now she stood by the kitchen island, invisible as Marcy directed cleanup like a cruise ship captain. "Green beans in the glass," Marcy chirped, pointing at Daniel. "And oh, make sure Jude gets some pie to take with her." Jude smiled thinly and took the foil-wrapped containers. The kind of smile you wear when you've been handed your own past in Tupperware. Upstairs, the guest bedroom, the one Jude used to sleep in, had been transformed into a reading nook, according to Marcy's Instagram caption from last month. Plants in suspended macrame holders, a narrow chaise lounge no one sat on, and a color-coded bookshelf with titles no one read. Now, when Jude visited, she stayed in the basement. Cold air, thin carpet, a low ceiling. Her suitcase sat open next to a utility sink. She changed into flannel pajamas and pulled on wool socks. The radiator clicked behind her like it was chewing on its own teeth. Her leftovers sat on the folding table beside her travel mug. No one had offered to walk her down, or even said goodnight. Jude pulled out her phone and opened the Photos app. Her thumb hesitated before scrolling. First came recent shots. Chloe smiling in costume, Marcy's holiday table setting, Daniel and Marcy at a vineyard with hashtags about balance and blessings. Then came older ones, faded with time but stored carefully. Daniel at 5 gripping a fire truck, Jude in her nursing scrubs, her hands on his shoulders, his college graduation, his wedding. She stopped on one that always made her pause. Daniel and Marcy under an arch of baby's breath, Jude just off to the side, holding her late husband's pocket square. Half the venue had been her financial doing. She had offered without being asked. She remembered writing the check in her sunlit kitchen, a small thrill in her chest at being needed again. Her hands moved quietly now, deliberately. She rose from the bed and moved toward the narrow dresser where Marcy had placed a diffuser and a stack of spa-scented hand towels. Jude opened the bottom drawer. Inside, carefully folded, were the family quilts she'd hand-stitched years ago, relegated now to guest storage. She took out her phone again and began snapping quiet photos. The monogrammed silver set her mother left her, now tucked beneath boxes of holiday wine glasses. The rocking chair with a split in the leg. The grandfather clock that no longer chimed. She moved with the care of someone preserving not just objects but evidence of having mattered. In the corner of the basement, a cardboard box labeled Tax Docs 2005 to 2012 sat unopened. She peeled it open and found a pile of papers, joint statements, insurance policies, old contracts. She set aside the ones with her name on them, scanned what she could, quietly, efficiently. When she finally lay back in the too-soft guest bed, the hum of the HVAC kept time with her thoughts. She didn't cry, but her eyes didn't close for a long while. Morning came with Chloe's tiny knock. "Come in, sweetheart," Jude called. Chloe slipped into the room in socked feet, still in pajamas, a mess of bed hair spilling over her face. She tiptoed to Jude's side and handed her a folded note. On it, in wobbly handwriting and glitter pen, "I like when you come. Love?" Chloe Jude's throat tightened. "You're my favorite part of this house," she whispered, pulling the girl into her lap. Chloe tucked her head beneath Jude's chin like she used to at age 3. "Are you staying for breakfast?" Chloe asked sleepily. Jude glanced at the staircase, heard Marcy's voice rising about missing whipped cream and Starbucks orders. She kissed Chloe's temple. "Maybe next time I'll have a better seat." Chloe tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Jude smiled. "It means I'm planning something." Back in her car, parked halfway down the sloped driveway, she tapped open her messages. A reply had come through while she'd been packing her leftovers. Sasha, realtor. "I can swing by this weekend. Want to meet at the property?" The scent of Earl Grey curled into the cold hallway like a polite warning. Jude Carter stood in her second kitchen, pouring steaming water into chipped porcelain mugs. A plate of shortbread rested on the table, untouched. The radiator clicked and hissed behind her, but she heard them through the wall. Daniel's booming laugh, the blare of commentators calling a touchdown, Marcy shouting something about refills. None of them had asked where she was going this morning. None had noticed her carry keys to the side property. They thought the house next door had fallen into disuse, a storage place for outdated furniture and old memories. A ghost house. Jude let them keep that illusion. The bell above the door jingled softly. Sasha Harper stepped in, all black boots and wind-blown curls, clipboard under one arm and curiosity in her eyes. "Mrs. Carter," she said, surveying the polished banister and glistening pinewood floors. "I thought you said this place was unlisted." "It is," Jude replied, handing her a cup. "I wanted you to see it before the world did." The warmth from the tea seemed to thaw Sasha's surprise into sharp-eyed focus. She walked the perimeter slowly, shoes silent on the floorboards. "Your family's next door?" she asked, nodding toward the muffled cheering. Jude just sipped her tea. They moved room by room, Jude narrating with practiced calm. The crown molding in the living room still intact, the original clawfoot tub upstairs, a cedar-paneled closet no one had opened in 5 years. Everything was clean, air fresheners placed discreetly, every window latched to avoid the winter draft. Sasha paused in the upstairs master bedroom, brushing her hand along the windowsill. "You could sell this for cash in days. The market's starving for this kind of inventory in Asheville right now." Jude opened the closet door. Inside sat a series of dusty boxes labeled Daniel 2003, wedding stuff, and Dad's tools. She didn't flinch. "That's what I was hoping to hear." They sat on the edge of the bed. Sasha opened her notepad, blinking. "Any existing liens? Loans? I co-signed Daniel's mortgage when he and Marcy bought their place. Half the down payment was mine." Jude's voice didn't waver. "My name is still on that deed." Sasha's brows rose. "So you have legal leverage." "Legal, financial, and familial, a trifecta," Jude said softly. "What's your timeline?" "Quick, quiet. You understand?" "I do." They spent another hour discussing strategy. Staggered showings, private listings, no public signage until closing day. Jude didn't want Daniel finding out until it was a done deal. She'd dealt with too many entitled patients over her nursing career to tolerate that tone in her own son. After Sasha left, Jude returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop. She logged into the shared family account, an old arrangement left over from when Daniel had convinced her to centralize funds after her husband's passing. Jude transferred $200 to a new credit union account, then another $300 the next day, just small enough not to trigger suspicion. In 3 days, she'd moved $2,100. The private trust fund was already in motion, registered under Chloe's full legal name, with a post office box as its mailing address. No one could touch it without her permission. That night, she returned to Daniel's house for dinner. Marcy had ordered in. Pizza boxes sat opened on the counter. Marcy wore fleece pajamas and held a glass of red wine like a prop. Daniel scrolled his phone at the table, not looking up when Jude came in. Chloe ran over and hugged her waist. "Did you go to the store?" she asked. "Something like that," Jude said, smiling. They ate in silence for a while, save for the occasional sports recap playing softly on the kitchen TV. Jude took a bite, set her plate down, and waited. Daniel looked up, finally. His tone was casual, too casual. "You know," he said, wiping his hands with a napkin, "maybe it's time we talk about options. You know, for when you can't do all this yourself anymore." Jude tilted her head. "What kind of options?" Daniel shrugged. "Just, maybe it's time you think about assisted living. Something low maintenance, safe." Marcy nodded too quickly. "Exactly, somewhere with a nice dining room and activities." Jude didn't answer. She just picked up her fork again, eyes fixed on the slice of mushroom pizza cooling on her plate. But inside, something sharp clicked into place. The cold December light spilled through the frosted bay windows, casting halos around everyone but her. Marcy chirped instructions from behind her phone, angling everyone into place like they were cutouts from a glossy catalog. Red sweaters, cream-colored pants, matching slippers. Chloe giggled in the middle, her front tooth missing and proud. Daniel wore his festive dad expression like it was part of the outfit. Jude stood at the end of the line, holding a mug of untouched cider. Her sweater was beige, yes, but not the beige. Not the same custom-matched holiday cream that Marcy had selected on her Pinterest board. Instead, Marcy had handed her a plain, oatmeal-colored scarf from the coat rack. "Everyone ready?" Marcy called, adjusting the camera again. "Oh, Jude, just wrap the scarf tighter, yeah?" "Looks more intentional." Intentional. Jude obeyed in silence. The shutter clicked 3 times. Then Marcy glanced at the screen and frowned. "Let's do one more. Chloe, straighten up. Daniel, smile like you mean it." Jude held her place, one hand lightly resting on the arm of the couch. Her fingers brushed the upholstery, new and too stiff, unlike the velvety one she'd picked out 2 decades ago. That couch had seen toddler tantrums, teenage heartbreaks, Sunday naps. This one looked like it came with an instruction manual and a warning not to spill red wine. Chloe turned her head mid-shot. "Why isn't Grandma wearing a red sweater?" The room faltered. Daniel gave a tight laugh, eyes flicking toward Marcy. "Because Grandma didn't bring one, sweetie." "I wasn't asked to," Jude said quietly, still smiling. "Oh," Chloe said, confused. Marcy clapped her hands. "Okay, that's enough for now. Let's warm up and make cookies." As the others dispersed, Jude stepped aside and checked her phone. The document had come through while they posed. Digitally notarized, time-stamped, legal. Transfer of title confirmed. Her signature, neat and unwavering, locked it in. Back at her apartment that evening, she moved like clockwork. She sat at her kitchen table beneath the soft hum of the overhead light, the only sound the ticking of the old ceramic wall clock. She opened a folder labeled Post-Xmas and tucked the finalized deed inside. Then she dialed Sasha. "I'm ready," she said. "Post-holiday launch then?" Sasha asked. "Yes, December 27th. Quiet prep begins tomorrow." "Understood. I'll handle the cleaners, stagers, and photos myself. You won't have to lift a finger." "Good." Jude sipped her tea. "I've lifted enough." She wrapped the phone call, then reached into the cabinet above the fridge, high enough that no one ever thought to check. Inside was a small velvet box. She placed it on the table and opened it. A silver key lay nestled in dark blue satin. It wasn't engraved, but it didn't need to be. That night, she carefully wrapped it in tissue and tucked it into a tiny gold box. On the tag, she wrote, "To Chloe, for later." Christmas morning arrived with the usual chaos. Wrapping paper, cinnamon rolls, Daniel trying to figure out new Wi-Fi gadgets, Marcy complaining about how long the coffee took to brew. Chloe was the only one who noticed the small gift box at the back of the tree. She picked it up and read the tag aloud. "Grandma, what's this?" "Something just for you," Jude said. "Don't open it until you're older. It's special." Chloe nodded solemnly, tucking it into her backpack. She didn't ask questions, but her eyes sparkled with importance. Jude stayed for brunch, offered to help with dishes, and was waved off. By the time the football game started, she was back in her apartment, fireplace glowing, slippers on, everything still. The phone rang. Unknown number. She answered calmly. "Mrs. Carter? This is Thomas Rudd. I'm the buyer Sasha mentioned. We'd like to go all cash, no contingencies. My wife and I are looking for something exactly like this." Jude let the words settle before replying. "And the closing?" 14 days, if you're comfortable. We're prepared to wire a deposit tonight." She stood, walked to her window, and looked out over the bare trees. There was no hesitation in her voice when she answered. "I'm comfortable." The table shimmered with candlelight and cranberry glaze. Silverware clinked in polite rhythms. Jude sat at the end, the old matriarch's seat, the one her husband once occupied before the cancer took him slow and quiet. It used to mean something. Now it was just the seat farthest from the thermostat and closest to the door. Daniel reached for the turkey leg with a flourish and chuckled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, Mom," he said, waving a porcelain plate under her nose. "That's the antique china. We wouldn't want any more casualties, would we?" Jude didn't flinch. She ladled warm brown gravy into the center of his plate like a practiced waitress, then offered the bowl to Marcy, who accepted it like it was gold. Marcy smirked. "Can't get this kind of serving in assisted living, huh?" Daniel laughed, oblivious, mouth already full. Jude smiled at Chloe across the table. The little girl wore a red velvet dress and a crooked Santa pin. She gave her grandmother a secret thumbs up, and Jude winked back. Marcy swirled her wine and launched into another monologue. "So, I've been thinking," she said, pausing dramatically, "about the house next door. It's just sitting there, right? And if we had access, Daniel and I have ideas. We'd probably open up the kitchen, maybe even Airbnb it part-time." Jude turned her wine glass gently, slow enough to feel the cool stem rotate under her fingers. It's not like it's worth much as is," Marcy continued, reaching for the sweet potatoes. "It's a little dated." Jude looked up and nodded once. Not a sound escaped her lips. She let the conversation roll on without her. Daniel was now talking about work stress, how nobody at the company knows how to handle pressure anymore. Marcy jumped in to complain about her decorator ghosting her mid-project. Chloe quietly fed a piece of stuffing to the family's terrier beneath the table, biting back a giggle. Jude raised her glass. "To the Carters," she said softly. Everyone raised theirs except Chloe, who raised her juice box instead. "To Grandma," Chloe added. That drew a brief silence. Then Daniel cleared his throat, awkwardly muttering, "Sure." Cheers. Jude drank, not for sentiment, for closure. The next morning, frost glossed the grass outside like a final coat of polish. Jude's car sat parked on the street, engine quietly idling. She wore a long gray coat, gloves in her lap. From her angle, she could see the edge of the lawn at 224 Sycamore, the house next door, just as the "sold" sign was driven into the soil by a gloved hand. Sasha gave a discreet wave from the porch. Jude didn't wave back. Instead, she shifted into gear and drove. Past the bakery Daniel loved, past the school where Chloe's winter pageant banner still flapped in the breeze, past the hardware store where she once bought a grill with her late husband. Each turn of the wheel carved her farther from obligation. Her final stop was a modest brick building with a brass plaque, Whitaker and Shields, Estate Law. The receptionist greeted her with a warm, "Happy Holidays." Jude returned the kindness with a soft nod and took a seat in the office of her longtime attorney, Mr. Shields, a man with silver-rimmed glasses and a memory like a locked drawer. "Are you sure?" he asked, scanning the document she slid across the desk. She nodded. "Remove Daniel Carter and Marcy Carter from the Living Trust, effective immediately." He raised a brow. "No share? Not even residual? Not even a spoon?" He adjusted his glasses. "You understand this means—" "I do," Jude said, voice sharp as the December wind outside. "They think I'm waiting to be buried beneath family obligation." "I'm not." He nodded slowly, sliding the papers into the folder with the kind of finality that carried generational weight. As he notarized the change, Jude looked out the window and spotted a cardinal perched on the branch outside. Bright, defiant, present. "You've been patient, Mrs. Carter," he said. "I've been trained," she replied. As she walked out, snowflakes had just started falling, a slow drift, like the sky was clearing its throat. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "You still coming by this weekend? Marcy wants to show you the new backsplash idea." Jude smiled faintly. She didn't reply. Daniel's phone buzzed. Then his face changed. He was standing at the kitchen island halfway through heating up leftover brisket when the alert popped up. Subject line, "Property transfer confirmed. 224 Sycamore Lane." He blinked once, twice, then opened it. "Marcy," he called, his voice warping somewhere between confusion and alarm. "Did you know Mom was selling the house?" Marcy looked up from her laptop, a yogurt spoon hovering midair. "What house?" Daniel didn't answer. He was already scrolling, scanning the official letterhead. Attached, a finalized deed transfer, the buyer's names, the seller, Judith L. Carter. His hands tightened around his phone. The one next door, he said. She sold it. Marcy stood. What the hell are you talking about? To who? Some couple from New Jersey. Cash. Closed yesterday. They stared at each other for half a second too long. Then Daniel slammed the microwave door shut and stormed toward the foyer. He called her, straight to voicemail. Called again. Still nothing. By the third attempt, he was shouting into the phone, "What the hell did you do, Mom?" Marcy followed behind, her tone growing shrill. She didn't even ask us. That place is part of our block. I had plans. I was literally drawing renovation sketches. She must have done it behind our backs, Daniel snapped. No, she planned this. She plotted it. She waited until we were busy with Christmas and then boom, signed it away like we're disposable. Daniel rubbed his temples. I'll call her again. He did. This time she answered. Hello? Jude's voice was even, not cold, not warm, just level. You sold the house? Daniel's voice was sharp enough to cut drywall. Yes. To strangers? Without talking to us? Yes. You know that property was part of our… Your what? Our future. Marcy had plans. Jude's tone didn't waver. You called me a freeloader, Daniel. There was a pause. He didn't think she remembered. Not really. I listened, she said. Mom? He scoffed. I didn't mean that seriously. No, she said softly. You meant it quietly. Marcy grabbed the phone. This is outrageous, Jude. You don't just sell property without informing family. This is going to court. Mark my words. Do what you feel is right, Jude replied. Do not condescend to me. I'm not. I'm finished. Click. She hung up. Daniel stood there, red-faced, phone pressed against his temple like he was waiting for it to grow wings and apologize. She hung up on me, he muttered. She's lost it, Marcy said, pacing now. We'll get a lawyer. It's not done until escrow closes. We'll stall it. Daniel refreshed the email. His heart stopped. Escrow had closed, fully funded, no contingencies, non-refundable. Holy hell, he whispered. She beat us. That evening the phone rang again, this time in Jude's apartment. She didn't check the number. She knew. Grandma? Chloe's voice was soft, like she was hiding in a closet. Hi, honey. Are you mad at us? Jude exhaled gently, the kind of exhale meant to hold back tears. No, sweet girl, I could never be mad at you. You didn't come over, and Daddy said, things, he's yelling a lot. Jude sank into her chair by the window, her heart tightening. I needed some space, that's all. Will I still get to come over? Jude smiled. You always have a place with me. There was a long pause. I miss you, Chloe whispered. I love you most, Jude replied. Don't forget that. After the call, Jude went to her phone settings, paused, then scrolled to blocked numbers. She hovered. Daniel, Marcy. One tap, then silence. She closed her phone, stood up, and walked to the small wall safe behind her bookshelf. She turned the dial carefully and slid out the trust documents again. Chloe's name, right there in elegant font. Untouchable, sealed. Let them scream into the void. Let them take their backsplash plans and court threats and Instagram reels and yell into a room she'd already exited. The next day, Daniel visited the house out of pure desperation. But the locks had been changed. A moving truck sat in the driveway. A woman in a puffer coat waved at him, smiling. We're the Rudds, she called cheerfully. Just moved from Jersey. Daniel's face drained of color. Wait, he said. You bought this? Closed Friday, she beamed. All cash. He stared at the sold sign like it had personally betrayed him. Marcy's influencer post about family betrayal didn't land like she thought. She had filmed it 3 times, first with tears, then with righteous anger, finally settling on quiet devastation as she sat against a white shiplap wall, clutching a coffee mug that said, Blessed. Her caption, When you give your whole life to a family legacy and get blindsided by selfishness. Generational betrayal. Inheritance hijacked. Family trauma. Within minutes, the comments turned. Didn't your MIL pay your down payment? You're not entitled to someone else's property, babe. This is giving major rich people problems. Her follower count dropped by 1,100 by sundown. The reel got shared on Reddit, Screenshotted, memed. A TikTok teen lip-synced her video under the title, "When Karen Doesn't Get Grandma's House." Marcy stormed into the kitchen, hurling her phone onto the marble countertop. "They're dragging me like I'm the villain." Daniel didn't look up from his laptop. "You posted it." "I was trying to get support, sympathy, exposure." "Well," he muttered, "you got exposure." She spun around, voice rising. "Aren't you going to do something?" Daniel tapped the keyboard, jaw tight. "I already did." He'd called an old fraternity friend in real estate law, someone who owed him a favor. 2 hours later, the truth came back like a hard slap. "Your mom's name was always first on the deed. Sole owner after your dad died. You and Marcy were never listed, not even as contingent inheritors." Daniel had stared at the screen, stunned. "What about the co-signed mortgage?" The friend just laughed. "You've been living in her credit shadow for 15 years. If anything, you owe her." That night, Daniel didn't eat dinner. He sat in the garage for a long time, engine off, radio playing softly. He wasn't mad. He was something worse. Humiliated. Across town, Jude folded a navy cardigan into a moving box, slow and precise. Her new apartment, just 8 blocks away, was already painted, cleaned, and waiting. A quiet senior community nestled against the base of the mountains, with a wraparound porch and a shared herb garden. She'd bought it in cash 3 weeks ago. No one knew. She didn't tell Daniel, didn't owe him that. She moved room to room, packing only what mattered: an embroidered pillow she'd made in the 80s, her mother's Dutch oven, the floral teacups she used on Sunday mornings. Everything else was set for donation. Her laptop blinked with Sasha's final email confirming the post-sale wire transfer. She knelt to tape a box shut and paused. Her coat, slung over the chair, rustled as she moved. Something slid from the inner pocket, a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully. Crayons on printer paper, Chloe's handwriting, uneven but full of pride, "Best grandma ever," beneath a drawing of a house, 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Jude stared at it for a long time. Then she walked to the bookshelf, cleared a spot, and placed it in a frame. A knock came at the door just as the last box was sealed. She blinked. No one was supposed to know her move-in date yet. Jude's knees cracked as she stood. The apartment was still mostly boxes, and the smell of fresh paint clung to the walls like unspoken tension. She stepped to the door, not expecting anyone. Not at this hour. Not without a call first. She opened it slowly. Chloe stood there in a thin hoodie, cheeks pink from the cold, backpack sliding off one shoulder. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, and that was all. Jude didn't speak. She pulled her in by the shoulders, held her tight. She felt the girl's breath hitch once, then settle, like wind dying down after a storm. Inside, Jude wrapped her in a throw blanket and sat her on the couch. Her hands moved automatically, setting the kettle on, pulling cookies from the freezer, turning the heat up 2 notches. Her mind was racing, but her voice stayed calm. "Did you walk?" Chloe nodded. "I stayed on the sidewalks, it's not that far." "You could have been hurt." "I was careful." Jude looked into her eyes. "Why?" Chloe sniffled and pulled her knees up. "Dad was yelling. About you. Said you betrayed the family. Said he should have cut you out a long time ago." Her voice cracked. "I didn't like how he sounded. And Mom just sat there nodding. I asked if I could call you and they said you're not part of things anymore." Jude's hands clenched around the tea towel. She exhaled slowly. "That's not true." "I know," Chloe said quietly. "So I left." Jude sat beside her and ran a hand through her tangled hair. "I'm not mad." "You're not?" "Number you listened to your heart." "That's brave." They sat like that for a while, the kettle beginning to whistle. Later, they baked cookies, oatmeal chocolate chip, Chloe's favorite. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the apartment, warming every corner. They ate them on the floor, cross-legged, the TV playing an old black-and-white Christmas movie no one was watching. Jude pulled out a blanket and tucked Chloe into the pull-out bed. "Story?" Chloe asked, already half asleep. Jude sat beside her and opened The Wind in the Willows, reading softly until the girl's breathing evened out. When the last page turned, Jude leaned down and whispered, You'll always have a home with me." Chloe didn't stir. Morning came pale and gray, the windows fogged with condensation. Jude brewed coffee, her body moving slowly, mind sharpening like the cold. She called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring, voice already flaring. "Where the hell is she?" "She's safe," Jude replied. "You had no right." "She walked to my apartment, Daniel, alone, in the dark, while you were too busy yelling to notice she was gone." Silence. "I'm bringing her home, but we're going to do this my way." "I don't need your—" "I'm not offering anything," Jude said flatly. "I'm ending it." She hung up. Daniel opened the front door with his jaw already clenched. Chloe ran to Marcy, who gave a half-hearted hug, eyes darting toward Jude. "You crossed a line," Daniel said. "You think you can play hero after burning everything down?" Jude handed him an envelope. He opened it right there on the porch. His eyes flicked across the legal text. "Termination of all shared property arrangements. Full financial separation. Finalized. Irrevocable." "You think this means you win?" he hissed. "I think it means you don't get to keep pulling the strings on something you didn't build," Jude replied calmly. Marcy stepped forward. "You can't just cut us out like that." "I already did." Daniel stepped forward like he wanted to say something more, but Jude turned and walked back to her car. That afternoon, she sat at her kitchen table, pen poised above a crisp sheet of stationery. She wrote with care, folding each word into the page like embroidery. "Dear Chloe, if you're reading this, it means you're 18. You've always had more light in you than anyone gave you credit for. This world may try to bend you into silence. Don't let it. You've inherited more than you know. Love always, Grandma Jude." She sealed the letter and slipped it into a padded envelope along with a notarized document, a copy of the trust fund registry. Chloe, sole beneficiary. No early access, no parental override. Conditions: age 25 or sooner for education or first property purchase, with Grandma's blessing already on paper. Jude walked it to the mailbox, her coat fluttering behind her in the wind. The red flag went up, so did her chin. The local news covered the sale, but the real story was invisible. Under the headline, "Senior Downsizing with Class in Asheville Suburb," Jude's old house sat front and center on the real estate blog. The photo showed fresh mulch, a tasteful wreath, and a couple from New Jersey beaming like they'd won a prize. The article praised the surprisingly modern transition of an aging homeowner who chose independence over assumption. No mention of Daniel, or Marcy, or Chloe, but the comments told another story. Good for her. Families don't always know what they've got. Protect your peace, lady. Jude didn't comment. She just bookmarked the article and made tea. That week, her phone buzzed more than it had in months, not from family, but from neighbors, old colleagues, and people she hadn't heard from in years. "I read the piece," one said. "You always were one step ahead." "I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did," said another. Then came the call from the library. "Mrs. Carter, we're hosting a community forum this month," the organizer said. "Would you be willing to speak on navigating aging and independence? We're calling it The Invisible Matriarch." Jude chuckled. "I'm not invisible anymore." The room was full that Saturday. Mostly women, mostly gray-haired with lined faces and quiet eyes that had seen decades of being overlooked. Jude wore a navy cardigan and stood behind the podium without notes. "I didn't downsize," she told them. "I right-sized. I stopped pretending my presence was conditional on being useful." The crowd didn't cheer. They nodded, solemn and knowing. That was better. Afterward, as she sipped lemon water in the corner, a voice called from behind her. "Jude Carter?" She turned and gasped. Gail Renner, high school choir, junior prom group, debate team rival. 50 years vanished in a blink. "Gail?" They hugged, and it was like snapping a bone back into place. Gail was in town helping her daughter after knee surgery and staying far longer than intended. "Her husband keeps hinting I should look into assisted living," she said with a tight laugh. "But I paid off their first mortgage. Can you imagine?" Jude could. They started meeting for coffee on Thursdays, then Fridays, then Wednesdays too. By March, they added Eleanor, a former professor whose son had redecorated her house without permission. Then Sheila, a widow whose niece tried to move in to help and never left. They called themselves the Deeded Women, a joke at first, until it wasn't. They brought old property records to the table, wrote letters to council members, helped neighbors get wills notarized, hosted Know Your Deed nights at the library. It wasn't revenge. It was repair. Jude felt her spine straighten each week. Like the more she gave away, the less weight she carried. But peace has a funny way of being interrupted. One evening, her mail slot clinked. She sorted bills and flyers mechanically until she spotted the thick envelope marked Certified Legal Documents. The sender, Carter and Blake, Family Law. Her heart didn't race. It paused. She carried it to the kitchen, set it beside her tea, and sliced it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside was a copy of her will, the one her lawyer had finalized last month, now covered in red pen. Alongside it, a formal notice of contestation. Petitioner, Daniel Carter. Grounds, undue influence, diminished capacity, malice. There was a post-it on her fridge Chloe had made, stuck up with a butterfly magnet. Don't let the turkeys get you down. Jude read it, then read the letter again. She didn't tear it up. She didn't scream. She folded it back into the envelope, clipped it with a paper fastener, and placed it in the folder marked Defense. She sat down, turned on the kettle, and stared at the steam curling up like smoke from a slow, quiet fire. The courtroom was beige and cold, the kind of government issue space where heat didn't reach corners and justice came in folding chairs. Daniel sat at the plaintiff's table in a too-tight suit and too-loose logic, flanked by a lawyer with slick hair and a leather briefcase full of assumptions. Across the aisle, Jude sat in a charcoal coat and navy turtleneck, hands folded neatly on her lap. Her lawyer, Mrs. Caldwell, was a woman of few words and airtight files. Beside her rested a thick binder, chronologically tabbed, color-coded, notarized to the last decimal. 32 years of bank transfers, title deeds, tax records, and letters of financial support. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Mills entered. 65, iron hair, no patience. She adjusted her glasses, skimmed the file handed to her, and exhaled like someone already late to lunch. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, this is a case of undue influence. Our client contends that Mrs. Carter's recent property decisions were made under emotional distress and that her updated will unfairly disinherits him and his wife. The judge raised an eyebrow. And your basis? Daniel's lawyer gestured. Mrs. Carter had lived on and off with her son. She benefited from his financial guidance for years. We believe she was manipulated into selling assets and altering documents to the detriment of natural heirs. Caldwell stood calmly. Respectfully, Your Honor, we've submitted 37 documents showing Mrs. Carter's sole ownership, her clear mental capacity, and her full financial independence, including records of her funding her son's mortgage, college tuition, and wedding expenses. Judge Mills leafed through the pages. Her face changed. Huh. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Carter, were you aware your mother paid for your first down payment in full? Daniel shifted in his seat. She offered. Did you repay her? I thought it was a gift. Mills narrowed her eyes. Funny how often gifts become expected inheritances. Marcy, seated behind Daniel, crossed her arms with a scoff loud enough to draw glances. The judge didn't look at her. Caldwell continued. We've also provided a psychological evaluation confirming Mrs. Carter's competence at the time of the will's amendment, and audio documentation, at her request, of multiple conversations showing Mr. Carter's attempts to coerce her into changing her decisions. She clicked a small recorder. Daniel's voice echoed through the speakers. I should have cut you out years ago. The judge lifted one hand. That's enough. A long silence settled. Then the gavel fell. Petition to contest is denied. Mrs. Carter's decisions stand. The court recognizes her autonomy and finds no evidence of coercion or diminished capacity. Daniel slumped. Marcy grabbed her purse like it might be used as a weapon. This is bullshit, she hissed. The judge looked directly at them. Being family doesn't entitle you to someone's assets. Being decent might have. Court dismissed. Outside, the wind had picked up. Chloe stood by the vending machine, holding a pack of pretzels she hadn't opened. Her face was drawn, old in a way only children forced to witness adult failure could be. Jude crouched beside her. "You okay?" Chloe nodded, then flung her arms around her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jude held her tightly. "None of this is your fault." "Is it over?" Jude nodded into her hair. "That's our last court date." They pulled apart slowly. Chloe sniffled. "Can I stay with you this weekend?" Jude blinked. Her voice caught before it escaped. "You want to?" Chloe shrugged. "It's quieter at your place. And you don't yell." Jude looked up toward the sky, overcast but clearing. The courthouse behind her felt smaller now. She squeezed Chloe's hand. "Let me make a call." Jude didn't mean for it to happen. It started quietly, like most things that matter do. She was halfway through her talk at the Asheville Public Library, standing before a room full of retirees, caregivers, and a few scattered college students. Her voice was steady, words deliberate, not angry, not boastful, just honest. Her topic was simple, what we leave behind that they don't expect. She spoke about legacy, not in terms of assets, but respect, choices, control, the slow theft of decision-making by people who claimed it was for your own good. The audience leaned in, and then, almost as an afterthought, she held up the framed drawing Chloe had made, the one she found tucked in her coat pocket during the move. Crayon on printer paper, 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, under a bright yellow sun, both smiling, a crooked house in the background. And across the top, in bubble letters only a child could write, "Best Grandma Ever." She didn't explain it. She just held it up and said, "This is the only inheritance I care about." The room went still. Someone sniffled. Click. A young woman in the back row, freelance journalist, Jude later learned, snapped a photo. She posted it that evening with a caption. At today's local elder rights talk, this woman shared her granddaughter's drawing. She survived legal battles, family betrayal, and public shame. She held this up and said, "This is the only inheritance I care about." Hashtag, best grandma ever. Tagline, "Don't bite the hand that raised you." It caught fire by morning. By Tuesday, it was in BuzzFeed's 15 Things That Restored Our Faith in Grandmas, then Reddit, then Twitter. By Friday, a TikTok had racked up 2.3 million views, users stitching themselves with "What would your grandma do?" challenges. Jude didn't even own TikTok. She found out when a librarian waved her phone at her with a grin. Daniel found out too. He posted a carefully worded note on his Facebook, trying to counter the narrative. No one talks about what happens when aging parents become difficult. Families are complicated. He was instantly ratioed. "You mean your mom sold her own house and you got mad? Bro, she literally owned the deed." "This you?" Followed by screenshots of his wife's viral meltdown video. Even Marcy went quiet. Jude stayed silent. She wasn't in it for revenge. She had nothing left to prove. But the invitations started rolling in. A major network wanted her for a documentary. Silent Mothers, the new face of elder neglect. A podcast reached out. Then a speaking bureau. She declined most of them, except one. The women's shelter downtown was hosting a fundraising gala. They asked if she'd attend, maybe speak a few words. She agreed. What she didn't say, what no one knew, was that she had just sent a wire transfer to that same nonprofit. Anonymous. $100,000. The memo line? "In honor of future freedom." She donated it using Marcy's maiden name. Let her name build something real for once. That weekend, Chloe curled up on Jude's couch, knees tucked under a quilt, watching the viral video on her iPad. The screen played softly. Jude's voice, the drawing, the crowd's applause. Chloe turned the volume down and looked up, eyes wet. "Grandma?" Jude paused in the kitchen, mid-pour on the hot cocoa. "Yes, sweetheart? Am I the reason you were hurt?" The question landed like a stone in a still pond. Not dramatic, just devastating. Jude crossed the room slowly, set the mugs down, and knelt in front of her. "No," she said gently. "You're the reason I healed." Chloe blinked. "Really?" Jude nodded. "You reminded me who I am. And who I'm not anymore." They held each other in the quiet hum of the living room. Outside, the wind rustled the leafless branches. Inside, the frame still sat on the mantel, crayon colors unfaded. Tomorrow would bring more noise, more headlines, but tonight was still. Jude stood barefoot on her small balcony, the late spring breeze teasing the edge of her linen robe. The mountain air in Asheville still carried a chill in the morning, but her basil had taken root, the cherry tomatoes were flowering, and the lavender leaned happily toward the rising sun. She bent to water the parsley, her fingers brushing cool soil. It had taken months, but the balcony had transformed. Wooden planters along the railing, a bird feeder that swayed just enough to bring cardinals without making them nervous. Inside, the apartment was warm, not in temperature, but in spirit. The quilt from her old guest room lay draped over the couch, softened by years of use. The kitchen was small, but hers. Every mug had a memory, every drawer closed all the way. Jude poured herself a second cup of coffee and padded into the living room. Her inbox chimed. Subject: "Congratulations. Your essay will appear in next month's AARP bulletin." She exhaled through a smile. The essay was short, barely 800 words. She'd called it "On Being Treated Like You're Temporary," a meditation on how older women are slowly erased in homes they built, relationships they funded, rooms they once ruled. "I was supposed to fade," she had written. "Instead, I replanted." They said it would run nationwide. Her friends, Gail, Eleanor, and Sheila, were already planning a brunch to celebrate. Jude had never had a circle like this, not in her 40s, not even in her 50s. But now every Tuesday was coffee and crossword at Eleanor's, Thursdays, garden walks, once a month, book club at Gail's. They didn't gossip. They plotted. They edited each other's wills, reviewed loan documents, flagged shady retirement offers. They gave a presentation last week at the senior center titled, "Know Your Deed, Know Your Worth." People had to bring in extra chairs. Chloe started coming over every other weekend. They made pancakes from scratch and walked to the local bookstore, where Chloe now had her own punch card. Jude had even shown her how to deadhead flowers and stake tomato vines. "Do plants ever get tired of growing?" Chloe had asked once, staring at a yellowing zinnia. Jude had smiled. "Only if someone forgets to give them light." She didn't say it out loud, but Chloe had become her light. One morning she opened her contacts list, scrolled, hovered, Daniel Carter. She tapped, "Delete contact?" She didn't hesitate. The screen blinked. Gone. Not out of anger, but because dead weight didn't deserve space in a blooming garden. Later that day, Chloe arrived early, holding something behind her back, eyes lit up with a secret. Jude let her in and offered lemonade, but Chloe shook her head. "I brought you something." She placed it on the table carefully, unwrapped in a dish towel patterned with little turkeys. Jude froze. It was her old turkey platter. The ceramic one she'd used for 30 Thanksgivings, the one that Daniel had once joked she was too clumsy to handle anymore. "I found it in a box in our garage," Chloe said. "I think Mom was going to donate it, but I saved it." Jude traced the scalloped edge with one finger. A faint chip at the rim, still perfect to her. "I remember you carving the turkey on this," Chloe said. "You had that yellow apron with the big sunflower on it." Jude smiled. "Still do." "You should keep this," Chloe added. "It's yours." There were a dozen things Jude could have said in that moment, but none of them fit better than what she finally whispered. "Thank you for remembering." Chloe leaned into her side. Some things shouldn't be forgotten. Outside the window, the wind rustled through blooming basil and lavender, the garden alive with color, scent, and breath. Jude looked down at the platter again, then out at her little patch of sky. Jude sat in the cool, mahogany-paneled office of Caldwell and Brenner, hands still and spine straight. A calmness washed over her that wasn't passive. It was earned. This wasn't surrender. This was punctuation. The clean, precise period at the end of a long, sentence-heavy chapter. Mrs. Caldwell clicked her pen and slid a thick folder across the desk. Everything is in place, she said, with the certainty of someone who'd outlived doubt. The trust is fully funded, distribution age set at 25, unless needed earlier for education or first home. Health access clause remains. And the disinheritance clause. Still ironclad? Jude asked. Caldwell nodded. If Daniel contests, again he's automatically removed from any contingency claims, permanently. State law backs it. Jude exhaled. Good. They moved through the documents slowly, one signature at a time, one page at a time. The air smelled faintly of old paper, leather, and the citrus cleaner used on the windows. Outside, the light shifted in bands across the polished floor, like sunlight filtered through certainty. When it was done, Jude reached into her bag and removed a thinner envelope. These are personal letters, she said, her voice measured. To be delivered after I pass. One for Chloe, one for Daniel, one for my attorney in case of any disputes. Caldwell took them without opening a single flap. You want a copy of the new deed? Jude shook her head. Already printed it. Back at the condo, the framed copy of that very deed waited on the mantel above the fireplace. It had taken her all morning to choose the right frame. Warm oak, smooth edges, wide matting. She'd even ironed the document lightly through a dish towel, careful not to smudge the ink, the name, Chloe Grace Carter. Beneath it, in smaller print, her own name, Judith L. Carter, trustee and grantor. It didn't just mark a transfer of property, it declared a shift in lineage, in legacy, in who got to write the next part of the family story. Chloe arrived that evening, cheeks pink from the walk over, her backpack swinging loosely from one shoulder. Jude had made grilled cheese and tomato soup, simple and golden. Chloe dunked the sandwich quietly, eyes on the framed paper. Is that real? She finally asked. As real as anything, Jude said. Chloe walked to the fireplace, studied the document like it was written in a foreign language she was just beginning to learn. My name's on it, she whispered. But I didn't do anything. Jude stood beside her. You did everything. I don't get it. You remembered who I was when no one else did. You saw me. And someday, when you're old enough to understand the full weight of that, this deed will mean more than property. It'll mean history. It'll mean the end of pretending you don't matter. Chloe touched the glass. Will it stay here forever? Jude smiled. It's yours now. You can hang it wherever you like. Chloe looked up at her, eyes wider than usual. Can I keep it safe? Jude leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. That's all I've ever asked. They sat together afterward, curled up on the couch under the old sunflower quilt. The fireplace flickered gently, the light casting gold shadows on the wall. Somewhere in the kitchen, the wind nudged a spoon against a mug with a soft ting. Jude's phone buzzed on the end table. Daniel's name flashed for a moment before disappearing, blocked and already forgotten. Chloe looked over. Was that him? Jude shook her head. Number just a reminder. Of what? Jude smiled. That we're exactly where we're meant to be. Chloe was quiet for a while. Then she turned, legs tucked beneath her, face serious in a way that startled Jude with its calm. You're not just my grandma, she said. You're my hero. Jude's breath caught, not for what was said, but because it was true. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary filled the small condo, rising from the oven in warm, savory waves that wrapped the living room like a quilt. No TV blaring, no strained laughter or shallow compliments, just the low hum of conversation, the clink of glass against glass, and the occasional burst of genuine, unscripted laughter. Jude stood at the stove, pulling out a tray of cornbread stuffing, its golden top crisped just the way Chloe liked it. She wore her old yellow apron, the one with the sunflower faded at the edges, and her hands moved with an ease that came not from habit, but from intention. The dining table, small and round, was set for 5. A simple linen runner, 4 white plates, cloth napkins folded into quiet triangles. In the center, a ceramic dish of cranberry chutney, 2 lit candles, and a vase of cut garden herbs, clipped that morning from her balcony. Jude looked around at the faces now gathering at the table, Gail was already telling a story, her hands animated as she reenacted a kitchen mishap from the 70s. Eleanor poured sparkling cider with a dramatic flair that made Chloe giggle. Sheila was in her usual floral scarf, dabbing her eyes from laughter and not sentiment. And Chloe, bright-eyed, flushed from helping in the kitchen, was carrying the turkey platter like it was sacred. There was no Marcy snapping photos for Instagram, no Daniel timing the meal between football quarters, just real food, real warmth, real women. As they sat, Jude raised her glass. "To simple things done well," she said. Glasses clinked, plates filled. Halfway through the meal, Gail leaned in. "Shall we do what we're thankful for?" "I'll go last," Jude said, slicing a piece of turkey and placing it on Chloe's plate. "I'm thankful for laughter that hurts your ribs," said Eleanor. "I'm thankful for second chances," said Sheila, her voice soft. Chloe set her fork down, eyes shining. "I'm thankful for Grandma, because she's never too tired for me." A beat of silence followed. Jude swallowed gently, her gaze resting on the herb centerpiece. "I'm thankful for boundaries," she said. The room paused, and then erupted in knowing laughter. Even Chloe giggled. "That's a good one." "Hard one," Jude replied, smiling. They ate slowly, like time had expanded just for them. There were no side conversations whispered behind napkins. No power plays, just quiet clinks of silverware, thoughtful bites, and stories that flowed like wine in the right hands. After dinner, they moved to the couch with pumpkin pie and decaf coffee. The windows were fogged with warmth, and outside the mountain sky had turned a shade of soft slate, evening mist curling at the corners. Chloe rummaged through her backpack and pulled out a manila folder. "I brought my school project," she said. "We had to write about something we want to pass down someday." Jude wiped her hands on her napkin, eyebrows raised. "What did you pick?" Chloe opened the folder and laid the pages on the table. There, written in her uneven but determined hand, was the title, Legacy. Under it, a drawing. Jude recognized it instantly. The house, the sun, the stick figures, recreated but refined. Now there were words written beside each figure. One said, "Seen." One said, "Strong." One said, "Safe." "I wrote about the turkey platter," Chloe said, "and the deed, and how you taught me that family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who protects you, who shows up." Jude didn't respond right away. She just leaned forward, took Chloe's hand in hers, and held it like it was the last promise she'd ever make. The others sat in silence, bearing witness. Then Jude said softly, "You already understand more than most adults ever will." Chloe smiled. "That's because I learned from the best." Outside, the wind tapped lightly against the glass, and inside, the candles burned steady. No tension, no performance, just thanks. And giving. A soft drizzle tapped against the balcony window, a rhythm that no longer interrupted but soothed. Jude stood barefoot in her kitchen, her hands dusted lightly with soil from the morning's potting. She moved slowly, not from age but from presence. Every motion was deliberate, every breath chosen. Her voice came not aloud, but like a soft current beneath the moment, a voiceover in her own story, told not for the world, but for herself. "Once I carved turkey for people who stopped tasting it years ago." She opened the balcony door and stepped outside. The wind was damp but gentle. Her cherry tomatoes had deepened to red, and the basil was lush and fragrant. She watered them with a small tin can, the spout clinking faintly against the ceramic pots. Her fingers brushed the leaves, and the scent rose like memory. "Once, I passed the gravy to the son who forgot who made his first meal." Inside, Chloe sat at the small, upright piano they'd rescued from the church thrift store, a little out of tune but full of heart. Her fingers found a melody she'd made up herself, something slow and hopeful, as untrained as it was beautiful. Jude closed her eyes. That sound, unpolished, real, was her anthem now. On the wall behind her hung a single frame, a crayon drawing, 2 stick figures, a house, and the words, "Best Grandma Ever." It was slightly faded now, but somehow that made it more permanent, as if time itself had signed off. I gave away the house, I gave away the fight, and somehow I ended up with everything that mattered. She returned inside, wiping her hands on a towel. Chloe didn't look up from the piano, just kept playing. Jude moved through the apartment like someone finally living inside their own skin. The armchair near the fireplace held her knitting needles, a book half-finished, a blanket Chloe had picked out herself. The place was quiet, but not empty. She settled into the armchair and let herself feel the rhythm of the keys. She wasn't waiting for a call. She wasn't wondering if she should have said something differently. The doorbell wouldn't ring with apologies that came too late. There was no damage control left to run. There was only this: a girl who saw her, a garden that grew, a table that fed more than just hunger. The piano slowed to a stop. Chloe turned. "I think I'm getting better." Jude smiled. "You always were." Chloe bounced up, flopping into the other chair with a dramatic sigh. "When I have my own house someday, I'm putting in a big kitchen, big enough to fit everyone." Jude raised an eyebrow. "Even the ones who don't bring anything to the table?" Chloe grinned. "Only the ones who know how to pass the gravy." They both laughed, and then, quietly, Chloe asked, "Did it hurt?" Jude looked over, curious. "What?" "Letting go." A pause. Not heavy, just real. Jude looked back at the framed drawing. Her voice was soft, only until I remembered that love doesn't live in square footage or last names. It lives in actions, in who keeps showing up. Chloe thought about that. Then I guess love lives here. Jude didn't answer. She just reached over, took her granddaughter's hand, and held it. The fireplace crackled. The sky outside turned pale gold. Jude leaned back, let her eyes drift closed, not from exhaustion, but from ease. No tension in her brow, no weight on her chest, just rest. In the background, Chloe hummed the melody she'd just played, quiet as a promise. On the wall, beneath the soft light of the setting sun, the drawing glowed like stained glass. Best grandma ever. The final dish had long been served, and nothing was left undone.